What's up, YouTube? Back at you with another video, another quick take. I got my main man, my partner, my brother here.
You already know. You don't even got to worry. It's the most charismatic man in entertainment. We are back, and let's do this damn thing.
Yes, sir. So this is a topic that I caught wind of earlier this month and maybe a little bit before that. And it's something that's been highly debated throughout the decades. And the fact that this is happening kind of gives me an opportunity to talk about it in a more concise and direct way. So we got an article courtesy of Yahoo News, which says Kevin Hart's comedy tour stop in Cairo canceled amid backlash over Afrocentric comments. The article goes on to say that Kevin Hart says, "We must teach our children the true history of Black Africans when they were kings in Egypt, and not just the era of slavery that is cemented by education in America." Do you remember the time when we were kings? Hart allegedly stated. Kevin Hart's scheduled show in Cairo, Egypt, was reportedly canceled this week following the comedian's alleged controversial statements claiming ancient Egyptian kings were Black. Egyptian management group R Productions released a statement on Monday saying that local logistical issues forced them to call off what would have been Hart's debut event in the country, per Middle East Eye. It is with a heavy heart that we share with you, due to local logistical issues, the cancellation of our Kevin Hart event scheduled for February 21st in Cairo, which was supposed to be a few days ago, is then canceled. It says, Hart sparked an uproar of criticism for alleged statements in which he took an Afrocentric stance regarding Egyptian history, claiming that the ancient civilization was historically ruled by Black African royalty. In response to the alleged statement, a wave of dissenting views from Egyptians on Twitter ensued, many of them calling for the cancellation of Hart's scheduled show, per the outlet. Some people said that users who claim that followers of Afrocentrism want to steal and attribute Egypt's civilization to Africans and tell modern Egyptians that we are occupying Egypt from them. We must all participate in the campaign to cancel Kevin's concert. Bruh, what are your thoughts on this whole situation?
First of all, let me say this. I'm not too well versed in Egypt's history, and I wouldn't consider myself a historian of Egyptian culture. But one thing I want to say to the last comment you said, someone wrote that he's accusing him of stealing land or whatever. Well, I would say, first of all, there's a history of many people doing that. Look at America's history. Who owned this land before Mr. Christopher Columbus decided he wanted to take it for himself? To be honest with you, this whole thing has been going on for a while. A lot of people, from Dr. Umar Johnson to Kevin Hart to God knows countless other people in higher celebrity status, have talked about Black Egyptians. I wouldn't be surprised if it is true. I believe it is true. You know why?
Mm-hmm.
Because Africans were the first people on this earth. So for them to say that he's lying, Afrocentric views, I disagree with them. But one of the things I found interesting, as I was reading, once you told me about this, I started just reading some of the headlines because I didn't know about this situation, and I'm seeing a lot of people chime in. one person, excuse me, Egyptologist Stuart Tyson Smith wrote the book The Egyptian World, and says that ancient Egypt had multiple ethnic groups, including dark-skinned Nubians and lighter-skinned Libyans and Egyptians. And many people have said that this is just an attempt for Egypt to whitewash history. That Kevin Hart is telling the truth, that ancient Egyptians are not the Egyptians of today. So this is different group of people who's living on the land now than it was, back in history, which probably has some truth to it. Like I said, I don't know Egypt that well to say, point any fingers, but one thing I will say is I believe it's true. I do think there were Black Egyptians, and there's many points in history where we've seen people try to erase it, try to change it for their own views, try to whitewash history, if you want to call it that. This is probably just another attempt for them to save face. A lot of people feel insulted, but there might be some merit to it. I'm curious. What do you think?
So I want to start off what I'm going to say by an article from the Washington Post by Charles S. Finch from 1987, October to be specific. And this is an article that I read back in September when I was just, at work and not doing anything. And I was just taking the time to read a lot of this information, just in my spare time. And there is a particular quote from the article, and I'm going to read it, which says, "How is it," he mused, "that a people now forgotten, discovered while others were yet barbarians, the elements of the arts and the sciences, a race of men now rejected from society for their sable skin and frizzled hair, founded on the study of the laws of nature, those civil and religious systems which still govern the universe." So, meaning that the way that Black people have been disassociated with, again, the origins of the development of civilization is damn near criminal. And to me, this is just another example of, again, Black people being pushed out to make way for every other race of people. Now, Black people have been on this earth for hundreds of thousands of years. Black people only are descendants of the mitochondrial Eve gene, okay, which means that the very first human being documented was a Black woman founded in Africa from the haplogroup L. So all Africans are, again, part of the haplogroup L. That's where we come from, okay? Egypt is in Africa, right? So if we were the first humans, or the first humans were Black, located in Africa, and Egypt is in Africa, who was there first? Black people. Black people. Facts. Now, I'm going to go a bit step further, and I'm going to say that the occupation of Arab people in Northern Africa is just another example of apartheid. Now, for those who are not familiar with what apartheid is, I'm going to read the definition of what it is. Apartheid was a system of institutionalized racial segregation that existed in South Africa and Southwest Africa from 1948 to the early 1990s. And in my opinion, it still goes on today, because I saw a video of basically two Black kids being beaten up by white people at a swimming pool because they weren't allowed to be at a white swimming pool, according to, again, those people that were there. Apartheid was characterized by an authoritarian political culture based on, I'm not even going to read that, but it says Baskap, which means bosshood or bossship, which ensured that South Africa was dominated politically, socially, and economically through minoritarianism by the nation's dominant minority white population. Now, the same thing is happening in North Africa, because these Arab Middle Eastern people that are there have been occupying there for a very long time, and they're just repeating the process. It says, according to this system of social stratification, white citizens had the highest status, followed by Indians and coloreds, quote unquote, then Black Africans. The economic legacy and social effects of apartheid continue to this present day, particularly the inequality. So, and I also want to read another portion, if I can find it, which basically is saying that there are a lot of races of people that have made their way toward, like, through Egypt, and have occupied Egypt at different times. This is why, when you look at Egypt, the way that the ancient Egyptians, or Egyptians period, are depicted, it's always open for interpretation, because you had the Greeks, say Romans, Middle Eastern people, Africans have all been there at different times. However, Black people were there first. We were there first. That is a fact. What they're doing over there, to me, is really just like a modern example of, like, Egyptomania, which is basically a period of renewed interest in the culture of ancient Egypt, sparked by Napoleon's Egyptian campaign in the 19th century. Napoleon was accompanied by many scientists and scholars during this campaign, which led to a large interest in the documentation of ancient monuments in Egypt. People still do not understand anything about ancient Egypt. It's like people have an idea, but again, that particular idea has been subject to many interpretations throughout the decades. Because if we understood and could really analyze and understand the true history of ancient Egypt, then there would be no necessity for researchers and archaeologists and stuff like that to be snatching up freaking ancient artifacts and freaking what is it called, sarcophaguses, and prying them open to analyze the mummies and shit like that.
Right.
So if we really understood, then why is it that they're still digging over there? Because they don't know. And the last thing that they want to do is associate what people consider to be, one of the greatest versions or iterations or variations of civilization to be associated with the first people that were there in the first place. They don't want that. So when Kevin Hart says that there's more to African history than slavery, that is a fact. I've been saying this for a long time, and I'm so glad that somebody of his stature is saying it. Now, unfortunately, he's getting like literally canceled for that, because they canceled the show. But you want to know why? Because it's true. If there was absolutely no merit to what Kevin Hart said, then they would just ignore it. They're like, oh, he's a comedian. We don't really take him serious anyway. But it's because it's true. They don't want that getting around. So the first thing that they can do is say, we don't want him coming here. And I'll even go a step further. The Middle Eastern people and Arab people that occupy Egypt today, these are people that were involved in the Trans-Saharan Slave Trade. You want to know why? Because these people are racist and prejudiced towards Black people who live in Egypt right now. In fact, ironically enough, a couple of weeks ago, I watched a video of a guy, a Black man, probably, in our age bracket, obviously maybe 20s, early 30s. And he went to go visit Egypt just to see if he would feel any sort of connection with, where our people are from. You know what I'm saying? And he said, as he was there, and mind you, he wasn't just there for a couple of days. He stayed there for an extended period of time. And he made a point to talk to, the modern, Egyptians and the people who actually, occupy Egypt right now. And he was saying that these people, they don't identify as Africans. They don't identify themselves as Black, and they don't identify themselves as Middle Eastern or Arab. And he was like, so what are you then? If you're not that? It's because they want to, again, hijack something that they feel is the best, disassociated with the people who are really behind, saying what they are reaping right now, which is, again, the land in the area of Egypt, and then just say, oh, we're not anything, but we're just Egypt. You get what I'm saying? That's like a Nigerian person saying, oh, I'm not Black, I'm Nigerian. That doesn't make sense. It's the same thing. These are Arab people because they were the ones that put on Europeans to the trade, the raping, the murdering, and the decade, hundreds of years long abuse of Black people. Because it says, during the Trans-Saharan Slave Trade, slaves were transported across the Sahara Desert. Most were moved from sub-Saharan Africa, which again is, West, East Africa, to be sold to Mediterranean and Middle Eastern civilizations. A small percentage went in the other direction. Estimates of the total number of Black slaves moved from the sub-Saharan Africa to the Muslim world range from 11 to 17 million. And the trans-Saharan trade routes conveyed a significant number of this total, with one estimate tallying around 7.2 million slaves crossing the Sahara from the mid-7th century until the 20th century. Okay? So this is what I'm saying. Like, these same people, they don't like Black people at all. So they're like, again, this is exactly what white people did in freaking South Africa. So let's go there, move the original people out, and then tell them that they don't stake any claim on the lands that they were from. So how would you feel if you built a house from scratch, from the ground up, brick by brick? You were in charge of the plumbing, the electricity, the insulation, the complete total construction of your home. And I come in there and I tell you, I move you out. So I strip you from your home, and then I move in there. How would you feel if after I moved in there, I told everybody that I built your home? How would you feel?
Oh, yeah. It's gentrification.
That's exactly. That's what's happening to Black people in Egypt and Africa right now. I'm glad that you used the word gentrify, because that's true.
Oh, absolutely. it's a common theme. A lot of people don't want to be associated with black. And I'm not trying to call out any groups in particular, but for instance, look at the Dominican Republic's history. It was Haitians who got overtaken by Europeans, and they took advantage of them. Whatever that history was involved into Dominican Republic, but many Dominicans wouldn't consider themselves black. I have met some who do.
because they're
A
not
lot of
black.
them don't. Right,
They're
because
not
they consider themselves.
Dominicans are not black. Latino people are not black, and black people collectively, as a collective, need to stop trying to house other races into black culture when they would never do the same thing for us. Stop doing that shit. Black people need to start gatekeeping blackness in black culture. If you have a black mother or father, okay, yeah, maybe sure, but then even then, you have to have a black consciousness. These people do not have black consciousness at all. Sorry to cut you off, but remember during the pandemic, Dominican people were beating up black people during the pandemic. Black people that were caught in their neighborhoods in, where was it, Dykeman or whatever area in New York, they were beating people up. Is it because, oh, we're black too? Oh, they're black too? So we need to stop that. We need to stop that. I do not want to hear that not Asians, Latino people are Africans or are black. They are not. Stop with the cap.
I know, but I was just as an example that it's a lot of times with these type of things is because people don't want to identify as black. They want to erase history. They want to change history. So, and these on the back end of Egypt, you don't got to be a rocket scientist to know that. Okay, this is this place is in Africa. Who owns Africa? Who lived in Africa? Who continually runs Africa? Black people. Now, throughout that history, of course, you have other people who kind of come in, overtaking it, try to take certain parts of the land for themselves. Christopher Columbus in America. So to say that it's beyond ridiculous that black people were the first people in Egypt, it's not a far-fetched idea. And even if you do think it's a far-fetched idea, why do you think that? If it's based in Africa, is on the African continent, and we all know Africa is black people, how do you not think that Egypt is in some way, shape, or form
associated
connected
with
to black
and
culture?
black people?
So, right. But it's come down to, I was reading a little bit about, the Kevin Hart comments, and seeing that who makes up most of the people who's living in Egypt. Is usually, I think it's a combination of different religions, different people, but it seems to be a trend of, I think, more people of Muslim faith or something like that. I'm not trying to dog them. I'm not trying to go over there and take their land, but at the same time, let's be real. You got to acknowledge your history. I mean, it's everybody to this day, whether especially if you grow up with your parents, what is the one most common thing? You go look for your history, who you come from, where you come from, right? How do you, occupy land and then decide that I don't want to know my history? Come on, you gotta know. You have to know. Everybody in America knows Native Americans are the ones that own this land. We know this is a Native American's land. I'm not calling this a white land, but the white man took it over. But we all know Native Americans took this land. So it's just one of those things, like you said, and maybe it's not cool to be identified as black, or many races and cultures don't want to be identified as black. I'll give you something else too. When I was in college, I took this class, and I got to learn about China, all these different cultures, right? And it was ironic because I found out, I didn't even know, because they don't advertise this. They have never showed black people in China. Now, I'm not talking about the black people from America who just moved to China. Obviously, we know there's black people like that. But this actual group of black people who's been in China for so long, and they look Chinese, but they are dark like me and you. They got, blonde hair, blue eyes, regular brown eyes, black hair. And it's a whole group of black people that occupy China. But what it is, it's a caste system, it's a color system. They don't want to show these people on TV. So most people don't know that there's actually black people who own sections of China, but they're not put on TV because it's that racism. And I'm not, like I said, I'm not here to call people out, but the truth is the truth. If you find out, I advocate people do the history or just do a little research. But
Mm-hmm.
it's an actual. I mean, there's an actual group of black people living there, and nobody knows about these people because they're not shown on TV. They're not advertised. We only see the American black people in China, but there's an actual group of people who are cast aside, who are treated like scum
Well,
because they're not.
let me ask you something. Let me ask you something. Have you ever wondered that? All right, put this in your mind. Think of a white person. Think of a Latino person. Think of an Indian person. Think of an Asian person. And then think about black people. Black people, or let me, before I even get to that, mentally, can you already see in your mind when you cast that image of those four people, those four races of people, you would agree that they all share like common traits amongst each other? Yes or no?
Of course.
Now, think about black people. We're the only ones that have the skin that we do. We're the only ones that have the facial features that we do. And we're the only ones that have the hair that we do. Not one race of people shares the same type of hair that we do. And then yet we are the ones that are cast aside, the bottom of the barrel, because we are different than they are. So let's also stop this whole, oh, we're all humans and we're all the same. No, that is not true, because we're the one race of people on this planet that stands out from everybody else, because all of them, they have the same facial structure, same nose shape, same type of hair, all of that. We're the ones that look different. Like, did you know that the Sphinx is a black woman?
No, I didn't know that.
And you know why? That they knocked that the nose out of any other part of the Sphinx that is, relatively intact. You want to know why that was knocked off? Because if it stayed on, it'd be obvious what it looks like, of who it resembles. Because I'm going to read this part. It says, in the case of the missing pharaoh, John Anthony West shows that the Sphinx does not resemble the old kingdom pharaoh Chephren, the traditional attribution. So basically they're saying that they attribute what the Sphinx is to that particular pharaoh. It says the analytical techniques he and Detective Frank Domingo used on facial photographs are not unlike methods orthodontists and surgeons use to study facial disfigurements. From the right lateral tracing of the statue's worn profile, a pattern of bimexillary prognathism is clearly detectable. This is anatomical condition of forward development in both jaws, more frequently found in people of African ancestry than in those from Asian or Indo-European stock. So this is what I'm saying. Thus, the Sphinx is likely a facial representation of a black African, considering that the peopling of ancient Egypt derived from an ancestral mixture of Africans. Facial soft tissue analysis of this fabled man line would support a much earlier origin for the Sphinx, when Africans may have dominated the region. And here's the thing too. See, from what I've learned in recent years about ancient Egypt and Egyptian culture, again, tens of thousands of years ago, black men were not always the pharaohs. In fact, women were the pharaohs. So it makes sense that the Sphinx is a depiction of a woman pharaoh, a female pharaoh. Now, men were the enforcers of society, but women were the decision makers. They were the lawmakers. So in reality, Egypt was a matriarchal society. We revered the black woman, tens of thousands of years ago. You see what I'm saying? But look at every other race of people. Every other race presents their societies as patriarchal societies where men are, saying the heads of right or wrong.
Right.
Even look at the history of America. Women didn't have rights. Women couldn't vote. We weren't doing that. We weren't doing that back in the day.
It's it's an unfortunate thing. It's a lot of people want to change history, and even now today, people want to change America's history and what it stands to be a human. And it's it, and then let me backtrack to the reason why I brought up Dominican Republic. Right, I have growing up in a city and going to middle schools and high schools and still knowing a lot of Dominican people. It's weird. Especially you go to certain pockets of, I'm just talking about New York
Mm-hmm.
specifically. You go to certain pockets where Dominicans live. There's some who absolutely do not want to be like black people, who look like black. I'll give you an example. There was one dude while I was growing up in the Bronx, right? This dude looked straight African, looked like he was in from Nigeria or something, right? But this dude was straight Dominican. He spoke Dominican. He was just very dark skinned, very he had hair like his hair was nappier than a traditional Dominican, but he looked African. But when he spoke and you saw his parents, you like, oh, he's actually Dominican. But the problem is because he looked Dominican, they treated him like crap, like trash. But then I also met white people who are Dominican. It's there because their history is so uh Dominican history. I've learned this in college, but that's why I brought up the was living in the Europeans, especially the Hispanic Europeans, came over and did what they did. They merged together, and now you have Dominican Republic. That's their history. So that's why Dominicans you usually see so many variations of color. Now, with the standard non-mixed black person, you will get a variation of different skin colors. But Dominicans, you could get someone who looks straight African, or you get someone who look like they from Italy. I mean, it's the scale is so large, but because of that, there's a lot of racism. There's a lot of a lot of that stuff going on. So that's why I brought it up, because I have met Dominicans who do feel like they are black people. They look at themselves as black people, and then I met some that don't want to be associated with
Let me
that.
tell you
So,
let me tell you something about Dominican people. First of all, there are a lot of Haitian people. I remember hearing this a lot, throughout the years, that Haitian people would get beaten up in the Dominican Republic.
oh yeah,
You know what I'm saying? Just for being black. So I don't want to hear, about, Dominican people being, black, because they're not, y'all not black. Y'all not black. And I'm also going to throw this in the pot too. And mind you, for people who are listening, the information is there. Just go look it up. Now, there was a video I saw, and again, these analysts, archaeologists, and people that excavate ancient artifacts and areas and things like that. So they had a sarcophagus, and they were analyzing a mummy, just a pharaoh, you know what I'm saying, that was mummified. And as they were analyzing his like skeletal, like his skull and his body and stuff like that, they ended up finding that the how should I say, what is it? I don't want to say the details, but basically his skeletal structure was more akin to a Nubian African black person than anything else. And it was funny, the white guy that was like I don't want to say he was in charge, but the guy who was narrating it, he looked disappointed. They don't want to know, they don't want to hear these things. They don't, because black people are most, again, associated with being like second, third class citizens, slaves, gangsters, thugs. So they don't ever want to associate us with what can be considered monarchies and, regal and greatness. They don't.
oh absolutely. And you know what? It's like I said, it's one of those realities of the situation. That's the only reason why I brought up Dominican Republic, is just because of the history. A lot of them don't want to be associated with that history, and hey, it is what it is. It's been a lot of people, they're raised to be a certain way, they taught a certain way, their history's taught them a certain way. Like you said, many people are taught, especially in America, right? Black people were slaves, black people this, black people that, and it's usually negative, but you don't hear about the good stuff. Why? Because that's irrelevant. They want you to know you're bottom of the barrel. And now we are seeing more people become a little more open and diverse in the idea that blacks and minorities are much more than just that. But look at our American school system. Everything taught about black people are negative. Yeah, you might get the occasional Martin Luther King or Malcolm X speech, but the majority of the stuff in the history books is not good. So, I do agree with Kevin Hart that in the instance, yeah, it is nice that, there should be more knowledge that black people have a rich history as well. It's just that many people are taught the negative side and not the positive side. So I definitely agree with him on that part.
So I wanted to read something about Nubia, which again is part of African history. And it says, Nubia is a region along the Nile River encompassing the area between the first cataract of the Nile and the confluence of the Blue and White Niles, or more strictly Al Daba. It was the seat of one of the earliest civilizations of ancient Africa, the Kerma culture, which lasted from around 2500 BC until its conquest by the new kingdom of Egypt under Pharaoh Thutmose around 1500 BC, whose heirs ruled most of Nubia for the next 400 years. Nubia was home to several empires, most prominently the Kingdom of Kush, which conquered Egypt in the 8th century BC during the reign of Pi and ruled the country as its 25th dynasty, to later be replaced by the native Egyptian 26th dynasty. It says from the 3rd century BC to 3rd century AD, northern Nubia would be invaded and annexed to Egypt, ruled by the Greeks and Romans. That's what I'm saying. So that area was, again, constantly overrun by different races of people. But to try to, which is, I'm not denying that, but to try to say, oh, black people had nothing to do with Egypt, stop that shit. Stop that shit. That I'm not having that, because that's what people are trying to say, and I'm not with it, because they probably, rather admit that white people were there at some point, you know what I'm saying, rather than black people, which is not true, because you see how Cleopatra was depicted by motherfucking what is it called, Elizabeth Taylor, who was a white on white pale woman.
Right. It's I think about something, and let's go back to ironically kind of funny, the play I was helping you read for recently about the character I was helping you read for. He made some good points, and I kind of think about stuff like this. What he's saying kind of relates to this. It's like, black people has always been looked down upon, always willing to help other races, but when it's time to be granted privilege to white acceptance and white power and all that stuff, they run right straight to it. So, and like I said, this is not a conversation of I'm accusing anybody of whitewash, whatever the case may be. It's just more simply of the fact that, look, you can't erase history, no matter how much you try to splice it, cut it, dice it. This is not Doctor Strange multi-universe. This is real life.
Yeah, but black people are the only race of people where, certain parts of our history, especially when you go way back, it's obscure. When you look at other races of people, it's not like that. See, white people can go way back. Asians can go way back. Indians can go way back. Latinos can go way back. But then black people, it's like we can only go back up until a certain point. Why? Especially if we were the first people here. So then we should have, a better idea of who we are than just what, society paints us out to be. Like Black Panther takes inspiration from Egypt. That is a fact. That is Absolutely. A fact. Black Panther, the Wakandans, they pray to the panther goddess Bast, which is an actual Egyptian god. But do Egyptians get mad at that? No. Do they get mad at that? And freaking Moon Knight, which is a Marvel show on Disney Plus, towards one of the last episodes, I don't remember any of the characters' names, but when the bad guy and like his cohorts are inside a pyramid in like this temple, all of the Egyptian sculptures and statues that are surrounding them are pitch black statues. What other race of people is as dark as we are, is as melanated as we are? Us, we're the only ones. So who are these, statues modeled after? Black people. But in that show, you see nothing but, again, Arab looking people.
Yeah, actually, ironically, I think that's the group I was looking for. Arab, like right now, Egyptian. Many people who live in Egypt are Arab, or that culture. So I'm not shocked. Like like you said, it is what it is.
It's apartheid, man.
People are going to try to rewrite history. I mean, I look at the gentrification happening in New York City, and people try to say Harlem is not a black historic landmark. Yes, it is. You know what I'm saying? Because it's white.
Same thing, different area.
Yeah, people would just. I'm not accusing everybody of being like this, but many people view many minorities, especially black people, as less than, and they don't want to be associated with that. So what do you do? This reminds me of a story I heard about recently. Lady one on Dr. Phil, and I actually researched her story. So she was talking about how, I forgot what area she was in, but her father had a multi-million-dollar estate, and it was a black area. But what happened was, over the years, her father passed away, but when he was growing up in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, many of the black people got pushed out because they started building more infrastructure there, and they tried, obviously, gentrification. That's what happened. but
Mm,
he never faulted. So when he passed away, he gave her the property. Now what happened was she became the only black resident there. It was kind of like what's happening, with many other, instances with black people, but she became the only black resident. And she is a black female with, all of this land and multi-million dollar estate. So what they do, they try to price her out. They try to have her white neighbors come in and offer to buy the property from her because she don't fit into the community, but she never wavered and she stayed there. And now she could tell the story of how, you know, generation this was a black area, and then things changed, but I'm still here. I ain't going nowhere. You're gonna have to deal with it, and so be it. Now that's how it should be. But how history is taught is that eventually they're gonna buy out. And that was a white neighborhood. It just so happened to have a black person there. That's exactly what the history books are going to say, because people don't want to associate black excellence, black success. It's always about slavery. That's the only time you hear about black people in America is slavery.
mm,
I mean, it's unfortunate, but that's just how people are going to write, the history books. And I just advocate people do your research, know about a lot of stuff, because, like I said, you'd be shocked about how much happens that you don't know about. Like I said, many people will be shocked to see black people with blonde hair, green eyes, and blonde hair and blue eyes, and that's an actual group of people that live in a different continent, but they don't get the airtime, they don't get recognized. You watch a lot of these documentaries and nature shows, and you see these groups of people, Native Americans, Indians, and black people, and you're like, I never knew these people lived here. I never knew about their history, and yet they actually live here, but
mm.
they're not talked about. That's just how our society is. It's about white power, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. And the disempowerment of black people. And it's like when black people actually take, steps to empower themselves, the volume is always turned down on a black person trying to, speak life into who we actually are, and to make feel bad about that shit. Now it's like the way that I've been seeing the word Afrocentrism. It's almost as if like it's synonymous with delusion. And I find that to be disrespectful, because any other race of people, takes pride within themselves. So why can't we do that? It's like we're only allowed to take pride in the civil rights freaking movement. That's it. That's
And hip
it.
hop.
Yeah, because I'm like, even when I saw Woman King, or the way when I take a look, like a deep dive look into, African cultures, out there, and it's something to be proud of. You know what I'm saying? And I feel like we've lost connection to that. So anytime we try to, plug ourselves back into it from a perspective in a powerful standpoint, it's almost as if we're not allowed to do that. And I don't like that. Even the way that we're depicted in some films. Like I think, again, Emancipation is probably going to be the last slave movie that I ever watch, because I'm so tired of seeing us in that light. In fact, Will Smith, there was a film called The Last Pharaoh that Will Smith was trying to develop around 2006, 2007, and the film was never made. Gee, I wonder why. You know what I'm saying? Because
Right.
he was looking to portray Taharka, which was a Nubian pharaoh.
Right. And this is a little small thing, and it kind of you talking about this kind of brought me back. I'm a big fan of the Justice League shows, right? But this people shot. So there's a Shira who's part of Justice League. She comes from a group of people. Uh, bunch of it's a pharaoh civilization. I forgot the name of it right now, but she comes from an area that's kind of like Egypt. When you look at how they present the history of her culture, her people, it's like Egypt in a way. They have pharaohs, they got sphinx, they got armor, they have certain equipment that nobody else has. It's kind of like Egypt, right? But when you look at, they actually did a little revisionary history, because her character is someone that when she dies, she just gets reborn in a different form, but she's still the same person. Her destiny is always going to be the same. So their history, they did an episode where John Stewart, uh, of the Justice League, Black Green Lantern, but there was actually black people in her culture, right? But what happened was the people from her race overtook that area. So now they became the higher powers and the black people became the slaves. So she started sleeping with the slave, and her husband got crazy and went on a mass murderous destruction and started killing all the black people and servants that that lived in that
Mm-hmm.
civilization. So it's one of those things when you watch episodes like that, it makes you think, huh? Is there a little truth to that? I
Right.
don't know, maybe, but it's definitely something where I do think what happens is many people, it's like a child, you know, if when someone beats you over the head with a certain idea and a certain way of living, it becomes ingrained to you, right? And I think for a lot of black people, we're taught, to be, look at each other differently. If you're light skinned, they get better treatment, they got better hair, they get more girls. For men, they get more girls, they get more opportunities. If you're dark skinned, you're ugly, you look like a monkey, you look like a gorilla. That's what our history has taught us, to be segregated. So when there are black people who try to bring that unit together, it's like, the people who's beat over the head, like, no, no, this is how you should think, even though it's not true, but that's become their reality. So a lot of black people, unfortunately, the reason why we will probably never be, you know, tight as people in Africa is because of all these different ideas, that the way how media presents us, how we're raised, how people are taught. So it's so much that goes into it, but our history dictates that, you know, we shouldn't rise together. We're taught to be individualized, to look at each other differently, to compete with each other. That's just our history. That's how they raised taught us, is that,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, gotta compete. And when you look at, the history, Egypt, and this conversation, this colorism thing, this racism thing happens in every race, even black people. How many times you see it all the time? People judge each other based on the color of their skin. And we talking about just black people. So I mean, Dominicans do it, Egyptians do it, Chinese people do it, everybody do it. So it's not far fetched to think that, yeah, black people might have been the first people in Egypt, but you know what? Eh, they're not big fans of that skin color. So why we bring that up?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Mm-hmm.
not shocked.
Yeah. So, and it says, see, these people, they are Muslim. And then what are Muslims, commonly associated with? Middle Eastern people. That's just who they are. You know what I'm saying? It says the Islamization of Egypt occurred as a result of the Muslim conquest of Egypt by the Arabs, led by the prominent Muslim general. I'm not even going to pronounce that name. So that's what I'm saying. Like, these are the people that are there. And, like, again, in essence and in short, what is going on in Northern Africa is the same thing that is going on in South Africa. It is gentrification, for lack of a better word, or for me personally, is just another form of apartheid by black people's, original oppressors, which is the Middle Eastern people and white people, Caucasians. That is just what it is. And again, black people, I think we all need to do a better job at going back, going much further than what society is showing us, and really go looking for who we really are, not just in Northern Africa, but all of Africa in general. But I'm just not going to sit back and then watch people who are not my own freaking disassociate me with where my people come from. That is a fact.
Right.
That is a
Right.
fact. And I implore every black person listening to this, again, like, there's so much to be proud of than what meets the eye.
Right.
So what are your thoughts? Please be sure again to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.
Peace.